Sunlight streamed through the cafe window, casting a golden hue on everything it touched. I sat there sipping my latte, engrossed in a book. When a shadow fell over my table, I looked up to find a pair of gentle blue eyes looking back at me. "Is the seat taken?" he asked with a tentative smile. "Not anymore. Go ahead."
I'm Peter. My friends ditched me last minute, and it looks like this cafe is everyone's favorite today.
I shook his hand, feeling a surprising warmth. "Kathy," I introduced myself, setting my book aside. We got to talking, and the initial awkwardness faded quickly. Turns out we had mutual friends, shared interests, and an uncanny knack for finishing each other's sentences. Laughter came easily and the hours slipped by.
I've never connected with someone so quickly, Peter admitted, his eyes shining with sincerity. There's something special about you, Kathy.
Blushing, I replied, "The feeling is mutual. It's as if the universe planned this meeting." We exchanged numbers, and from that day we're inseparable. Romantic dinners, long walks, movie nights, and even mundane grocery trips were transformed into adventures. Our love was the kind you read about in fairy tales, full of passion and genuine understanding.
One evening, after a picnic under the stars, Peter looked deep into my eyes. "Kathy," he began, his voice trembling. "I've never felt like this about anyone. I don't want to imagine a life without you."
I felt a lump forming in my throat, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words. Before I could respond, he knelt on one knee, holding out a small velvet box.
"Kathy, will you marry me?"
Tears welled up in my eyes as I nodded. "Yes, Peter. 1,000 times, yes." And thus began our journey towards forever. But little did I know that a storm was brewing, one that would challenge the very foundation of our love. The preparations for the wedding began with a flurry of excitement. We were determined to make it the most memorable event, a true reflection of our love. Dates were chosen, venues booked, and invitations sent out.
"Look at this dress, Kathy," exclaimed my best friend Lisa, holding up an elegant white gown with intricate lace detailing.
I tried it on, and as I looked at my reflection, I felt like a true princess. "It's perfect," I whispered, my eyes misting over.
"Peter won't be able to take his eyes off you."
The day finally arrived. The sun shone brilliantly, casting a golden aura over the quaint chapel we had chosen. Roses lined the aisles, their fragrance mingling with the scent of excited anticipation in the air. As I walked down the aisle, the world blurred around me, and all I could see was Peter looking dapper in his suit, his eyes moist with emotion.
"You look breathtaking," he whispered as I reached him.
I squeezed his hand. "Me only for you." The ceremony was beautiful, filled with vows of eternal love and commitment. As we exchanged rings, I felt the weight of the promise, a bond that was meant to last a lifetime. But amidst the joy, a cold shadow lurked. Sylvia, Peter's mother, sat in the front row. Her pale blue dress contrasted sharply with her icy demeanor. Every time our eyes met, I felt a chill. While everyone cheered and clapped, her applause was slow, deliberate, and almost sarcastic.
"Ignore her, Kathy. Today's about you and Peter."
"I'm trying," I whispered back. "But why can't she be happy for us?"
"Of course, Mom."
As they danced, I could see Sylvia whispering into Peter's ear, her eyes darting towards me occasionally with a hint of malice. I felt a pang of unease, but tried to shake it off, not wanting to let it taint our special day. Later that evening, as we were leaving, Peter pulled me close.
"Don't let her get to you," he murmured.
I sighed. I just wish she'd give us a chance.
"She will in time. We have our whole lives ahead of us."
But little did we know that Sylvia's cold shadows would soon become an all-too-familiar part of our lives. The house I grew up in held a special place in my heart. Filled with childhood memories, it echoed with laughter, secrets, and dreams. I was thrilled when Peter and I decided to move in and turn it into our marital home. We spent days painting walls, deciding on colors that reflected both our personalities. While I loved muted pastels, Peter had a thing for bold shades. After a playful argument, we settled on a deep blue for our bedroom. "I can't believe we're fighting over paint," I giggled as Peter mockingly brandished the paintbrush at me.
"Just getting practice for the years to come."
We bought furniture together, turning each shopping trip into a date, complete with ice cream stops and playful bickering. At night, we'd lie on our new couch, madly in love, mapping out our future. We bought furniture together, turning each shopping trip into a date, complete with ice cream stops and playful bickering. At night, we would sit on our new couch, mapping out our future.
I see us with a couple of kids running around causing chaos. Peter would muse.
I'd smile, adding, and maybe a dog or two. Our days were filled with love and laughter, a warm bubble protecting us from the world outside. But that bubble was frequently punctured by Sylvia's unexpected visits. One afternoon, as I was arranging flowers, there was a sharp knock. I opened the door to find Sylvia holding a casserole dish. Her eyes scanned our living room with a hint of disdain. "I thought I'd bring you some homemade lasagna," she said, forcing a smile. "I'm sure it's better than anything you might have made." Taken aback, I replied, "Thank you, Sylvia. That's thoughtful." But as she left, she whispered, "Take care of my boy. He's used to a certain standard." While I earned well working at a reputed company, Peter's earnings were modest. I never minded the income difference. What mattered was our love. However, Sylvia took every opportunity to remind me of my duties as a wife. One evening, as Peter and I were discussing finances, he looked worried. I brushed a strand of hair behind his ear. "Don't worry. We're a team. We'll figure it out," I reassured him. But his eyes were distant.
I just wish I could contribute more, he said.
Feeling a surge of protectiveness, I said, "Peter, your worth isn't defined by your paycheck. We're in this together." But old resentments and Sylvia's constant interference cast shadows over our blissful beginnings, creating cracks in our once solid foundation. The months sped by and life took on a routine. Mornings were spent in a rush, with breakfasts hastily eaten and kisses quickly exchanged. Evenings were our solace, a chance to reconnect. Yet our hard work started to pay off. Slowly but surely, our combined savings grew, largely due to my higher income. One day, while skimming through a magazine, I stumbled upon an advertisement for a stunning villa nestled by the lakeside. "Peter, look at this," I said excitedly, pointing at the glossy image.
Wow, that's gorgeous. But can we? He trailed off.
I nodded. "With our savings and a little more effort, we can make this our home." And so the dream took root. Days were spent in planning, nights in dreaming. The dream finally materialized when we moved into our villa, the glinting lake visible from our bedroom window. The evening we moved in, we celebrated with a simple dinner on our balcony, the soft sound of the waves providing a serene background.
To new beginnings, Peter toasted, raising his glass.
His glass. To love and dreams, I added, clinking my glass with his. But the serenity was short-lived. Just a week later, an unexpected knock rattled our morning. Sylvia stood at our door, her luggage in tow. I exchanged a panicked look with Peter. He hesitated, then replied, "Mom, you could have discussed this with us first." Biting back a retort, I tried to mediate. "Sylvia, it's not about permission. We just weren't expecting this." But it was evident. Sylvia had made up her mind. The days that followed were a whirlwind of adjustments. While Peter seemed hesitant but resigned, I felt like a guest in my own home. One evening, after a particularly scathing remark about my cooking, I confronted Peter. "She's making our life miserable. We need to talk to her."
Looking torn, he replied, "Kathy, she's old. I can't just ask her to leave."
"But this is our home too, Peter. We deserve to be happy."
He sighed. "Give it some time. Maybe she'll come around."
But deep down, I knew Sylvia's presence was not just an intrusion. It was a threat to our marriage. The magnificent villa that was once a symbol of our dreams and accomplishments soon transformed into a suffocating cage. With Sylvia's constant presence, every room echoed with her unsolicited advice and sharp remarks. One morning as I prepared breakfast, Sylvia ambled into the kitchen, eyeing the omelette on the pan. "Is that how you cook? No wonder Peter has lost weight." Exasperated, I retorted, "He hasn't lost weight and he likes my cooking."
Hearing the commotion, he walked in. Before he could say anything, Sylvia continued her tirade. "Your wife needs to learn to take care of a house. Maybe if she focused less on work and more on home." "Mom and us," he interrupted, his voice strained.
The days became a repetitive cycle of arguments and cold silences. My once beloved home now felt alien, its walls closing in on me. Sylvia's favorite pastime became lounging on our plush sofa, watching soap operas at a blaring volume, and summoning me for the smallest of tasks. One evening, as I returned from a particularly grueling day at work, I found her sprawled on the couch, a mess of wrappers around her. "Kathy," she drawled without looking up, "get me a cup of tea, will you? And clean this place up, it's a pigsty." Biting back tears of frustration, I responded, "Maybe if you helped around a bit, the house would be cleaner." She laughed, a mocking sound. "Why? That's what you're here for." That night, unable to sleep, I confronted Peter. "I can't do this anymore. I feel trapped in my own house. Your mother treats me like a servant." Peter rubbed his temples. "I know it's hard, Kathy, but she's my mother. I can't just abandon her." I felt a sharp sting of betrayal. "And what about us, Peter? What about our marriage?" He looked away, his voice barely a whisper. "She's just an old lady, Kathy. Can't you just tolerate her?" Tolerate. The word echoed mockingly. The man I loved, the one who once stood by me, was now asking me to endure the nightmare his mother was inflicting. My heart heavy with the weight of unspoken words and stifled emotions, I realized that the dream was rapidly turning into a nightmare. The sun began its descent, casting a golden hue over the villa, but inside the atmosphere was far from warm. Every morning I would wake up hoping for a better day, but each day mirrored the last. A relentless cycle of disputes, disdain, and discontentment. The beautiful abode that once symbolized hope, love, and aspirations now felt like a cold, gilded cage. I would often find solace in the villa's garden, tending to the roses and lilies, the gentle scent serving as a brief escape. As I pruned and watered, I pondered on the blooming and withering of relationships. My marriage, which once blossomed with love and promise, now seemed to be wilting under the oppressive shadow of Sylvia's presence. On that fateful evening, I sat in the heart of our luxurious living room, the soft glow from the chandelier illuminating the elegant decor, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. The house was silent, save for the distant sounds of Sylvia's TV echoing from her room. Memories of happier times flashed before me. Shared laughs, whispered secrets, and dreams woven together. It felt like a lifetime ago. When the front door clicked open, I straightened up, steeling myself. Peter walked in, looking exhausted. His tie was slightly askew. Lightly askew, his hair tousled, signs of another taxing day at the office. However, the sight that awaited him, me, sitting sternly with a steely resolve, seemed to drain the remaining color from his face. "Kathy," his voice wavered, filled with a mix of surprise and apprehension. Taking a deep breath, I mustered the courage to speak. "Peter, we need to address the elephant in the room." His brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean?" "Our marriage, Peter," I began, my voice quivering despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "It's falling apart, and unless we confront it, we're headed for a disaster." He looked taken aback. "Is this about Mom?" "Yes and no," I responded, trying to gather my thoughts. "While Sylvia's behavior and your inability to address it is a significant part, it's also about us. We've allowed external factors to drive a wedge between us. We're no longer the team we once were." Peter sank into the chair opposite me, his face etched with concern. "Kathy, I love you. And yes, I admit I've been torn between my love for you and my duty towards my mother." I shook my head, a bitter smile playing on my lips. "Peter, love is about making choices. And every day, with every action and inaction, you've chosen her over our marriage." He looked devastated, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I never intended to hurt you. I thought we could make it work. And that's the problem," I retorted, my voice rising in frustration. "Hope is not a strategy. We needed action, understanding, compromise. But all I've seen is your reluctance to address the issue and your expectation for me to constantly adjust." He took a deep, shuddering breath. "What do you want, Kathy?" Gathering my resolve, I spoke. "I've decided to leave, Peter. I can't and won't continue living in this toxic environment." Peter looked shattered. "You can't mean that. There must be a way." But I had made up my mind. "It's time we face the reality, Peter. We've drifted apart. Your choices have consequences, and now it's time for me to make mine." That night was one of the longest in my life. The villa's grandeur stood mocking, the vast rooms echoing the emptiness inside me. However, amidst the pain, a spark of determination ignited. I was resolute to regain control of my life, to teach Peter and Sylvia that I was not someone to be trifled with. The days that followed were filled with appointments, paperwork, and confrontations. The villa, which was primarily purchased with my earnings, became the epicenter of the legal battle. But beyond property and assets, it was about respect, recognition, and retribution. Every evening after work, I found myself in the office of Mrs. Hargrove, a seasoned attorney known for her fierce advocacy for her clients. She was a petite woman, but her presence was formidable. With each meeting, we meticulously built our case piece by piece. One day, while sifting through some documents, Mrs. Hargrove looked up, her glasses perched on the bridge of her nose.
Kathy, are you absolutely sure about this? The path you're choosing isn't easy.
I met her gaze, determination burning in my eyes. I've been pushed around and taken for granted long enough. It's time to set things right.
Very well. Let's get to work.
The courtroom was a place of high tension. On one side, Peter, looking worn and frazzled, stood with his lawyer. Sylvia, trying to maintain her usual haughty demeanor, sat beside him. But every so often, I caught a glimpse of fear in her eyes. On my side, Mrs. Hargrove and I were a united front, ready to face the storm. As the proceedings went on, it became evident that the odds were in my favor. I had not only contributed the lion's share to the villa's purchase, but I also had the documentation and evidence to prove it.
Kathy, isn't there another way? Can't we find a middle ground?
I looked at him, my heart heavy with a mix of pity and sadness. Peter, we had all the time in the world to find a middle ground. You chose not to. I turned to face her, my voice cold. I gave you a home when I didn't have to. It's you who chose to make it unbearable for me. The final verdict was a crushing blow to Peter and Sylvia. The court ruled in my favor, recognizing my primary ownership of the villa. The house I had grown up in was also legally mine.
We'll figure it out, Mom.
As for me, it was a bittersweet victory. I had regained my home, but at the cost of a relationship I once held dear. The mansion stood tall and proud, but inside its corridors echoed with memories of love, laughter, and now loss. Months went by, and the dust of the courtroom battle settled. Life took on a new rhythm, and I immersed myself in work and the process of rebuilding, until one day, fate had one more twist in store. Walking back from work, my heels clicking on the pavement, I saw a figure huddled by the roadside. As I drew closer, a familiar face looked up, eyes vacant and defeated. Peter. Our eyes met, a plethora of emotions crossing between us, pain, regret, loss. But I walked on, choosing silence over words. The chapter was closed, and it was time to move on.